And to wrap up this edition of the Rolling Stone Gang with a nice little bow, let us talk about science! For over a year now, we have been told to follow the science, trust the science. You're a science denier if you don't trust the science, and you are a science denier. You're a medievalist. You're a superstitious, backward, knuckle-dragging, drooling Neanderthal if you don't immediately kiss the feet of anyone who happens to have the title of doctor before his name. That's actually what is being said now, but it becomes very difficult to actually take science or scientists seriously when you actually see what science and scientists now encompass. Now, there are so many examples. You could do a soft science like history, you could do a harder science like physics, but this past week, Dr. Natasha Stovall, who is a clinical psychiatrist, not a clinical psychiatrist, a clinical psychologist, in New York City, said this, and, well, just listen for yourself.
Whiteness is like something that white clients are, really split off from often, and that it comes back as a ghost and kind of interferes with psychotherapeutic work, interferes with symbolization, with mourning, and then this disavowal from the identification of whiteness leads to a creation of the self that cuts one off from like empathetic identification from people who are different in some way, and then at the same time drains off, sort of the psychic energy of the person, of the white person. And I think that that's like an incredibly valuable conceptualization that I think immediately kind of encapsulates something that can be very useful as a way of thinking about the things that you see with white clients, including like these very typical presentations in private practice: anxiety, depression, social isolation within relationships. Like these things, I think, are often, you can be, depending on the situation, can be conceived as not just about whiteness, but not helped by whiteness, exacerbated by whiteness.
So, according to the science now, whiteness, quote unquote, is now a succubus. It is, in fact, a spiritual entity that sucks away a vital power from your body, just like the old succubi would take away men's sexual prowess while they slept. Interesting trivia: succubi were often blamed for wet dreams. That's actually was one of the explanations for wet dreams. Not that you wanted that explanation or even needed it, but I just think that it's interesting, as so many different facets of different cultures actually are interesting when they're allowed to be other cultures and not actually conformed to ideological woke thinking. Now, I think a lot of people are going to say that this is terrible, this is horrible, she should be fired, she should be all of these sorts of things, but really, gang, what did we expect? Literally, what did we expect? We have created a society where everyone is their own demigod, where everyone is allowed to basically create their own version of truth. And this has been happening for decades. This has been happening before Obama. I remember listening to Rush Limbaugh, the late great Rush Limbaugh, on his radio show. And he, I believe, he was talking about grade school math, how certain schools across the country, especially concentrated again on the coasts and on the blue, in the blue metropoli, they were refusing, math teachers were actually refusing to correct students' incorrect math problems. They were no longer going to put red marks on the problems that they had gotten wrong because it was just too traumatic. It was too traumatic. They would never learn that way. And then, of course, you had 2 years ago, you had the serious debate that 2 plus 2 could equal 5. In fact, the guy who started that actually had a very flattering interview done with him by Popular Mechanics. And so all of this, it was inevitable that this was going to spread everywhere. I think that a lot of people thought that as long as it stayed within the softer disciplines, history, literature, art, the foo-foo spheres of knowledge, we might call it. Everything was going to be okay. All we had to do was keep the hard sciences, math, chemistry, physics. We basically just had to keep STEM, and everything was going to be all right. Because STEM, that's where the real progress was being made. That's where the real money was being made. That's where real advancements were being made. I mean, you needed logic and objectivity even to run those things. The idea was almost that these were conservative fields, just innately, and that nothing was going to happen to them. Well, now we have seen that it is inevitable when you create a culture where everyone is a demigod who gets to decide what is true and what is false for them, then no one escapes. No field escapes. If Dr. Stovall 25, maybe even 15 years ago, had said what you just heard her say in her professional capacity as a clinical psychologist, there would be massive consequences for her giving such a preposterous, insane, asinine, and if we actually lived in a somewhat normal world, just completely hilarious definition and explanation for quote-unquote whiteness as this psychic demon monster that is out to actually destroy people. Both white people, because it destroys their empathy, and because white people then aren't empathetic. They are obviously monsters towards other people who don't look like them. But we don't live in that sort of world. And that's how quickly the world moves, gang. Again, 15 years, she would have faced serious consequences. Because she is not just a podcaster, just a blogger. She is not some nameless entity on the left. A clinical psychologist has to have a doctorate. You need a doctorate. You need about, what did it say? About 12 years of schooling. That's after high school. You need undergraduate, graduate study, and postgraduate studies. You need to write a thesis, a dissertation. You have to do the whole 9 yards in order to become a clinical psychologist. Which then actually proves something else. It's another demonstration, gang, that it's not just these stupid people on the periphery. It is the elites of the elites. And again, I think that a lot of people were just very comfortable leaving it that way. That, well, the elites are crazy. The elites are always crazy. But down here on good old terra firma, people are going to keep their common sense. No. The elites are the ones who drive society. They are the ones who steer society because it is their ideas that are traded amongst themselves, are actively taught, dispersed, and then those are the ideas that trickle down to everyone else. Again, within 1-2 years, I would not be surprised if actual psychology textbooks taught what Natasha Stovall is now blathering on about in New York City, about how whiteness is actually a ghost that drains away psychic energy. I mean, can we hear that? Can we even hear that? Psychic energy. She sounds like a new age tea reader. That's what she sounds like. You halfway expect her to be wearing one of those gaudy scarves across her head, wearing the hugely thick glasses with an owl on her shoulder, gazing into her crystal ball. Because that then becomes another result, another casualty of this. 2 years ago, gang, a little over 2 years ago, I made a video entitled The Age of Superstition. I argue that the 21st century would, if historians actually ever gained their sanity back and actually looked back objectively on our time period, would dub this not as the age of faith, not the age of reason, the age of progress, the age of science or anything, but as the age of superstition. And I said that because more and more, even back then, more and more, scientific opinion, scientific consensus, expert opinion across fields was looking more and more akin to magical thinking. There was more and more overlap between magical thinking of the past and so-called scientific thinking today. And that's true in numerous fields. I mean, everywhere. I mean, look again, we're still being told with the COVID to stay 6 feet apart from each other. There was a tweet, I saw it yesterday. Kids at some public school are being taught the zombie walk, where they hold out their hands like this so that they stay arm's length away from other kids. And they're all wearing masks, despite even the New York Times admitting in a piece a couple of months back in April, I believe, that no one has a merry clue where that 6 feet apart jazz started. It just appeared one day and everyone glommed onto it, despite the fact that masks have never actually been given the random controlled test, which is the gold standard to actually see if something is effective or not. Not just, no mention of the fact that children are at a very, 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 very low risk of having any real malignant effects, even if they contract COVID. Generally speaking, again, none of that matters. The facts do not matter. All that matters is the superstitious thinking. Because the superstitious thinking is what allows you to be a demigod. Because if it's all superstition, if there is no hard objective, and we would probably say today, natural connections between things, if there are no actual scientific connections within the material world, if it's all due to psychic energy, if it's all due to magical correspondence, magical imitation, then that's what allows you to be the demigod. That's what allows you to be the great magician in the center of your own little universe. Because then, simply by saying something, forming a new connection, having something imitate something else, that is what allows you to control the world around you. That's what allows you to control the world around you. And I don't even have to mention the fact, I don't think to you guys, because you guys are smart, how, well, if white people have ghosts that drain their empathy, that pretty much means that you need to be exorcised, doesn't it? But what is that exorcism going to look like, and what happens if it fails? Pushing it further, closer and closer and closer to the antebellum South being stamped across the face of the United States, again, just with a different ethnic group at the bottom, and without the nobility or spirit of the antebellum South. Gang, I have spoken for too long as usual, so I am putting a cork in it right there. Hope that you like these videos. Thank you for watching. Hope that you have a great week. Hopefully it's a little cooler for you. And in the meantime, gang, stay safe, stay free by daring to read, think, speak, and write. I'll talk to you soon. Ciao.